What if the moment you were born, your fate had already been sealed? Not by choice, not by accident, but by centuries of calculated decisions made in candlelit courts and marble palaces, decisions that valued purity over health, power over personhood. For much of history, royal families were obsessed with one thing: preserving the bloodline. And to them, that meant keeping it contained. But bloodlines don't stay pure. They coil, knot, and eventually turn against themselves. This is the untold story of the women who bore the silent cost of royal ambition. Their lives were marked not by jewels or glory, but by tragedy, deformity, madness, and sorrow. Here are 10 of the most inbred women in history, and why their stories matter more than ever. Isabella II of Spain. In 1830, a baby girl was born to the Spanish crown, and the reaction wasn't celebration, but calculation. Isabella's birth marked the end of a long line of hopes for a male heir. But she was more than a child. She was a symbol, a tool, and above all, a product of generations of genetic recycling. Her father was her mother's uncle. Her grandparents were also her great-grandparents. She married her double second cousin. The family tree didn't branch, it bent backward on itself. By the time Isabella turned 16, she had been married off to secure her position. She bore 11 children, only 5 survived, and whispers persist that none of them were her husband's. Her marriage was loveless, her reign was short-lived, and in the end she lost her crown, overthrown not just by politics, but by the slow decay of her family's legacy. Marie-Louise of Austria. Born into one of Europe's most entangled dynasties, Marie-Louise's very DNA was a map of aristocratic ambition. Her parents? Double first cousins, meaning they shared all 4 grandparents. That's not a family, that's a loop. Scientists today say Marie-Louise had only 4 unique great-grandparents, when most people have 8. That kind of genetic compression is rarely seen outside isolated island communities. At just 18, she was handed off in marriage to Napoleon Bonaparte, the very man her father had once warred against. This wasn't love, it was a treaty wrapped in a wedding veil. She was expected to produce a strong heir to 2 empires, while carrying the genetic burden of her ancestors. Behind the diplomacy was a woman in chains, tied by politics, trapped by blood. Lorraine Whittaker. Not all stories of inbreeding belong to ancient royalty. Some are still unfolding, in the quiet margins of our world. Lorraine Whittaker's story takes us to a forgotten corner of America, where generations of isolation and intermarriage created a family with devastating genetic consequences. She was born into a small town, away from scrutiny, where the gene pool had grown dangerously shallow. Lorraine is one of the most inbred individuals documented in modern history, and the mother of Timmy Whittaker, often described as the most genetically affected person alive. Their lives are not a spectacle, they are a reminder that the past doesn't always stay in the past, and that the effects of inbreeding, mental, physical, emotional, are not reserved for kings and queens. They echo in trailer parks, not just throne rooms. Maria I of Portugal, Maria the Pious. She was called Maria the Pious, but history might better remember her as Maria the Doomed. Born in 1734, Maria grew up in a palace, but not in peace. Her family was already deeply interwoven, and she made it worse. To keep the royal blood pure, Maria married her own uncle. It was a political move, but the cost was personal. Of her children, only half survived. As she aged, Maria began to change. She prayed excessively. She heard voices. She suffered from fits of despair so severe, her court declared her unfit to rule. She died in mental collapse, her mind unspooling in the same way her DNA had been wound too tightly. Her story isn't just tragic. It's inevitable, a slow crumble under the weight of bloodlines too tangled to bear. Marie-Louise Elisabeth d'Orléans. Her life reads like a dark novel, the kind you can't put down even as it breaks your heart. Born from a forced marriage between first cousins, Marie-Louise Elizabeth was the daughter of an illegitimate royal and a man pushed into a match he didn't want. She was born into conflict. She married into grief. Her husband, yet another cousin. Her 3 children? None survived past infancy. The death and disappointment broke her, and by the age of 14, Marie-Louise turned to alcohol. She drank through her teens. through her 20s, and into an early grave. Was it rebellion? Was it escape? Or just what happens when a girl is told from birth that her body belongs to the crown? Princess Alexia of Greece. Born in 1965, Alexia of Greece grew up in a world trying to forget monarchy, but trapped in its leftover DNA. Her parents, Queen Anne-Marie of Denmark and King Constantine II of Greece, weren't just royals. They were second cousins, and third cousins, twice related, once by duty, once by design. Their family tree was still tied to the legacy of intermarriage, even in the age of cars and televisions. Alexia's lineage overlaps with the British monarchy. Her ancestry echoes the same twisted knots found in the House of Windsor. Though she lived a seemingly normal life, the story beneath her smile is one of a woman caught between modern freedom and ancient bloodlines. Maria Antonia of Austria. Before there was Marie Antoinette, there was Maria Antonia, a woman whose very name has been mostly forgotten by history, even though her genetic tragedy rivals any tale ever told. She was a Habsburg, descended from a family famous for its trademark jaw and its self-inflicted doom. Her ancestry wasn't a tree, it was a genetic spiral staircase circling endlessly inward. Experts believe Maria Antonia was as genetically similar to herself as a child born of full siblings, a level of inbreeding that warps the body, weakens the mind, and shortens the life. She was the product of power gone unchecked. Her family ruled empires but could not see that their greatest threat wasn't war. It was themselves. Mummies 317A and 317B. They never wore crowns, they never ruled lands, and they never lived long enough to be named. But their tiny bodies, preserved for over 3,000 years, tell a story louder than any throne room could. 317A and 317B were stillborn daughters of Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun, husband and wife, but also half-siblings. These were not accidents. Sibling marriage was royal policy in ancient Egypt. Pharaohs were gods, and gods did not marry commoners. But divinity cannot fight genetics. Both girls were born with multiple deformities, evidence of a lineage so tight it snapped. They are the ghosts of dynasty, the result of centuries of ritual incest, echoing a truth the Egyptians refused to admit. Even gods bleed, and even kings break. Kimberly Colt, alias. This isn't ancient, this isn't royal, and that's what makes it so terrifying. In the early 2000s, Australian authorities uncovered a case that would shock the world. A rural family, given the pseudonym Colt, had practiced generational inbreeding in secret for decades. Kimberly Colt, one of the youngest women born into this nightmare, became a case study in genetic collapse. The community had no outsiders, no schools, no doctors, just children born to siblings, uncles, nieces, generation after generation. Kimberly was born into a genetic echo chamber, her body and brain marked by the accumulated errors of incest. When the government intervened, they found more than a family. They found a warning. That left alone, any group anywhere can reproduce the same horrors once thought confined to palaces. Cleopatra II Philopator. We end with a name that most people forget, Cleopatra II, not the lover of Caesar or Mark Antony, but a woman whose body bore the purest strain of dynastic madness ever recorded. She ruled Egypt, but her blood was Greek, Macedonian to be exact, part of the Ptolemaic dynasty which practiced inbreeding with chilling devotion. Her parents, siblings, her grandparents, siblings, her own siblings, married each other, and eventually so did she. This wasn't scandalous, it was expected. Ptolemaic rulers didn't just marry within the family, they never left it. Cleopatra II wasn't just royal, she was the culmination of 300 years of genetic obsession. Even her name was borrowed from a Syrian princess, one of the few hints that an outsider had ever been allowed in. She was powerful, yes, but also damaged, isolated, and eventually devoured by the very system that created her. From pharaohs' tombs to European castles, and even into modern-day trailer parks and hidden farms, the pursuit of purity and power has always carried a silent cost. It's easy to mock the absurdity of royal inbreeding, But these women, some crowned, some forgotten, weren't jokes. They were sacrifices, sacrificed to tradition, to ambition, to blood. Their stories remind us that history is not just shaped by war or conquest, but by the quiet arithmetic of biology, and that even the most powerful families can be undone by the very thing they tried hardest to preserve.